Well, hello and welcome to the Riverfront Reds show with one of our slackers, Rex Scott. I am Seth Shaner. And Rex, we just don't really know how to feel today, do we? It's like somebody kicked our dog. The Reds season is over.
I know. I mean, after all the highs and lows of that season and getting into the playoffs in the last game to have everything play out the way that it did in Dodger Stadium was definitely a gut punch.
I saw a tweet, and I don't know this gentleman. It was retweeted by someone I follow, but his name on Twitter is @BarryOnHere. But he put it pretty well, I think. He says, baseball is so weird. You watch a team for 162 games, and it feels like 5 seasons all in one. And then, boom, they lose 2 playoff games, and it's over.
Yeah.
And certainly if you don't make the playoffs, it's a little even more sudden than that. But I guess if you don't make the playoffs after 162, sometimes it feels like you're ready, right, for it to be done. But we weren't ready, that's for sure. So a bit of a sad day today. The Reds did lose both games in Los Angeles to the defending World Series champions Dodgers. You know, pitching, Rex, the hallmark of this team all year long, it just wasn't there, was it?
It wasn't at all, Seth. And we were, I think, all hoping for a stellar performance by the ace of our staff.
Yes.
And for me, it took me back to a very bad memory at the end of August. At the end of August, I was in Dodger Stadium for Green Day, watching our Reds play the Dodgers in a regular season game. And they roughed Hunter up that night as well. So
they did. Now, a report came out on Thursday that the Reds were tipping pitches, beginning with Hunter Green. I mean, we've heard this at different times this season. Chase Burns supposedly was against the Red Sox, but a very analytically minded staff is in charge of the Dodgers outside of the on-field operations. And if somebody was going to find something, it wouldn't surprise me if it's the Dodgers, right? I mean, so I guess we have that to sit around and stew about throughout the offseason.
Well, and I think I read somewhere that they've been in the postseason 13 of the last 14 seasons or some sickening statistic like that. So it's hard to be critical of them given that record of success.
No doubt. They pay so the thing the Dodgers did that should have been, well, it was definitely a signal when it happened that this is bad news for the rest of the league, is they hired a guy from the Tampa Bay Rays who knew how to run without money a team, right? And then they gave him money.
So, yeah. Like, he got Magic Johnson's money.
Yeah, that's right, among others. The funny thing to me as I sit here in Columbus, Ohio, I'm going to get to something here in a minute about that. The Reds scored more runs in 2 games than Cleveland did in 3 in their series. So There is that. But then you have to see that the Reds didn't get enough pitching and those sorts of things. So, hey, kudos to Matt McClain. He grabbed a knock or 2 there and kind of snapped out of his funk he was in. And Sal Stewart, the poor kid's blaming himself on a mistake he made. He drove in the first 2 runs. I mean, they don't get on the board early without Sal. So he at age 21 has kind of gotten that, cup of coffee, as they say, but he did so on a big stage, right? So I think there's some potential there for him to build on this experience.
And his post-game comments to me indicate the kind of leader that he's going to be for this club. Mm-hmm. I mean, he took all of that unto himself, put it all on his shoulders. And even if that's not an accurate depiction of everything that happened, it shows his integrity. It shows his class.
When the 21-year-old's saying things like that,
I know, right?
That is telling. So, hey, there's a lot of feelings that we didn't touch on yet. We're going to have a blow out the budget coverage of viewer mail this week. Some folks had to get their last salvos in. Now, that doesn't mean we're going away. I mean, the season's over, but the Riverfront is not done. But we'll get to those in a few minutes, Rex. But I wanted to have you on to acknowledge kind of the positivity you show as a Reds fan. Um, I don't believe I gave up on
Mm.
these Reds because mathematically they were still in it. But as things happen, like school starting for my kids and some of my work duties pick up in the fall and I have to do a little more here or there. And, obviously there's also football that starts. Um, I found myself less engaged, end of August, beginning of September than I would have liked to have been, or than if they would have been, in first place. And there you were in our Slack channel all the time. And it became, it became even more than that because you coined the phrase "never surrender," right? So,
That's right.
uh, tell me a little bit about your fanhood and kind of what makes you. Certainly, we can have disagreements on, hey, I wish Tito would have done this or that or the other. We'll talk about that later. But you, as a fan, what makes you stay so steadfast and positive about this?
So I grew up in Athens, Ohio, in the southeast corner of the state, and I was living there during the era of the Big Red Machine. They won both their World Series while I was in middle school. And, I remember the old National League West
Mm-hmm.
and how every year it was either us or the Dodgers. There was only one year during the decade of the 70s when somebody other than the Reds or Dodgers won that division. And then going through my college years, and I went to Ohio University in Athens, and the Reds were consistently a contender during those years as well. I moved to Arizona in 1991. And boy, I'll tell you, throughout the 90s and the 2000s, it's just been all famine.
Mm-hmm.
After a youth full of feast, it has
Yes.
been nothing but an adulthood of famine. But I am the son of a lifelong Red Sox fan, and my dad waited until he was in his 60s
Mm.
before his Red Sox won a World Series, and he always taught all of us to be in your seats in time for the national anthem, sing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" loud and proud during the seventh inning stretch, and stay until the last out.
That's right.
And because anything can happen, and that's the way I felt about this season, Seth. It was so full of highs and lows. I called us the trampoline team at one point because we were just always up and down, up and down. But going into that last stretch of games, especially looking at the fact that the Mets, I think, were like 13 games under 500 on the road, and most of their games in that final stretch were on the road. I felt like we had to be in it until there was no hope. Hence the term "never surrender." You got to go down swinging and until there's no hope.
You were definitely there, and Sid Price, our friend
Yeah.
on the Slack channel, she was there with us, and certainly we started kind of rallying around you and her and Sid. Like it was kind of like a galvanizing thing within our Slack. I mean, and then it became like good for you. I think most of the people in there kind of are admitting like, hey, yeah, I kind of thought that was about it, right? And there was Rex, positive, and it just felt good to see that pay off. And certainly, I'm with you, man. I've told the story before. In 1995, I went to the Reds Mets game where the Reds were down 11-3 going into the eighth inning, and my stepdad said, "We're leaving. We're going home. It's a long drive back to Columbus. This is a loser game. We're done. We're going." And by the time we got to Kings Island on 71, the Reds had come back and won the game 13 to
Oh
11.
man.
So and to the chagrin of my college roommate, because as an Ohio State guy, I was a student at OSU, and my freshman year, the basketball team went 8-22.
Hmm.
And we sat to the end as Mateen Cleaves and those guys from Michigan
Oh.
State beat Ohio State by 28 or whatever. And, the Michigan team with Robert Traylor came in and did the same. But the next year, the Buckeyes went 27-9, went to the Final Four. So, we were rewarded by staying. So I don't subscribe to the theory that I've heard. There's a guy named Steve Zabin. He's had national radio shows. He subscribes to the ale theory. Always leave early. I'm not an ale theory guy. I'm with you there, Rex.
No, that was one of the things that was really annoying about losing to the Dodgers is, and I saw this in person when I was out at Dodger Stadium at the end of August. They come late, they
Yeah,
leave early,
they do.
and they're spoiled rotten by their team's success. So,
well, and we know the St. Louis Cardinals are similar right now. They're in a down period for them. It's been 2 not so good years, and yet
yeah,
the fans have turned on them. I'll never forget the Kirk Gibson home run, right, in '88, and as that ball's going out, you can see beyond the right field wall. You could see the taillights of cars leaving.
yep,
Like that's a World
absolutely.
Series game. Come on. So no, one more thing before we get into the viewer mail, because this is gonna take a while to go through all our viewer mail. Thank you so much to all the Patreon members and the Slack channel guys and girls that participate. I do have one comment, and I mentioned living in Columbus. And if you follow me on Twitter, you probably saw me kind of going off a little bit recently. But the Reds entered last weekend, as we know, with a chance to make the playoffs. All right. They could have done so as early as Saturday night. Had the Mets lost that day as well, the Reds winning would have clinched the playoffs. Unfortunately for us here in this area, National Fox, the network,
Yes,
earlier in the week, they said, "Hey, Reds fans, we picked up your game. Be excited,"
right.
whatever. And all of a sudden I look at the listings and I'm not excited, Rex, because
No,
they can't get out of their own way. And at the end of the day, I'm mad at Cleveland. I don't like that. Whole thing, but it's not. It's the fault of Major League Baseball at the end of the day. But here's what happened: they already had the Guardians Rangers scheduled. They pick up the Reds game, and against the Brewers, and it says, okay, here in Columbus, they're going to show the Guardians. I emailed the general manager of the station here. I did, and I told him I'm at the Riverfront. I'd like a comment if I could to share, and he gave me a bland little comment about it's unfortunate for some fans that blah blah blah, but there's no other way. Like in the Browns Bengals is the same thing, 3 or 4 times a season. But like if you were like looking at let's say the Giants and the Jets, right? They accommodate the fans of those teams by not putting them on the same channel at the same time, to where the network has to pick which one or the local station picks which one they play. In fact, the Bengals have been put at 4:00 on a Sunday right before the playoffs to play the Jets because the Giants were playing at 1. And so for you to tell me that, hey, your team could clinch a postseason berth in a full season playoffs for the first time in 12 years, and we're not going to let you watch the game in an era now when every game is on TV or streaming or somewhere where I could try to get it, right? Like this wasn't even go to your sports bar or pay for a subscription.
exactly.
Couldn't do it. All right.
Right.
And so listen, Cincinnati's closer to Columbus than Cleveland. That's one thing. Another thing is, and I had the map, like the coverage map shows where it is. And the fact is, Columbus's Fox station, it extends, like for local cable networks or systems, it extends down to Chillicothe and even further south than that. And there, if you look at the bottom tip of that little map where it shows in blue where the Guardians were on and red is where the Reds are on, you could go due east from the city of Cincinnati about 80 miles. And all of a sudden you're in a blue range because it's a Columbus station. And those people are no way, shape, or form Cleveland fans.
No rhyme or reason to it. And I dealt with the same sadness, Seth, because my wife and I were in Ohio visiting family, and we were in Columbus. I have a brother who lives in Hilliard.
Okay.
And we couldn't get the game. And I was hoping that, because I have an MLB.com subscription through Prime Video, I was hoping I could watch it there, but I couldn't because Fox had preempted the coverage. Plus, my GPS rats me out, and it would have been blacked. I would have been blacked out anyway. So Yeah,
Sure.
I tuned into the radio. I
No,
listened
I
to the
did
radio
too.
broadcast.
But and I'll tell you the other thing is, like, my grandparents live close to where you grew up, just one county north in Morgan County, and they
Okay.
just switched to Spectrum. And Spectrum down there actually has Huntington, West Virginia's Fox
Right,
channel.
right.
So I didn't want to bother them and try to before I knew for sure. I didn't want to ask, hey, try to figure out where this channel is. But I texted my dad and I said, Dad, can you tell me what your Huntington channel says it's going to show on Saturday night? Is it Cleveland or Cincinnati? And even they were showing Cleveland, which makes no sense because how many times did you ever hear of the people that would take the train from Huntington, West Virginia to Cincinnati on Sundays? There was a train that went just for the double because they always play double headers. And they
I
would
love
always
that.
ride that train over there and watch both games of the doubleheader, and the train would wait until the doubleheader was over and take
Wow.
them back to Huntington and in other parts over there. That's a Reds area if it's not a Pittsburgh area. So
And no other sport has stories like that. I mean, I'm a sports guy. I love every sport, but baseball. There's something about its history, its simplicities, its complexities that I think is different from all others.
yeah, I mean the only thing close is being here in Columbus. I worked for a lady in an office when I was in college, and if you've ever heard of in 1950, Ohio State played Michigan, and they called it the Snow Bowl.
I have heard of it. Yeah.
And so at that time, I believe the stadium held around 90,000 people. Maybe it wasn't near as big as it is now. There couldn't have been more than 500 in the stands because it was almost impossible to get there. Um, but there's hundreds of thousands of people claim they were there for that game. But this lady I work for, she lived in Lancaster, Ohio, which is, on a normal day with no traffic would be about a half hour, 45-minute drive probably.
Right.
She said her dad took her to the game.
Wow.
And she described in detail all the cars off the road that couldn't get there. And that kind of thing I kind of glom onto as well. But you're right, baseball's different. And especially it wasn't coined that Cam Miller is so good at teaching us about these things, but it wasn't coined Reds country until Bob Howsam came along, right? But Reds country is way more than just Cincinnati.
No question about it.
Yeah.
No
And
question about it. It's I can remember the old Reds caravan days.
mhm.
Marty and Joe would go out with a couple of players, and
Yep.
and they would not just go into the Cincinnati area. They go into all parts of southwestern, southeastern Ohio, and into West Virginia, Kentucky, parts of Indiana. Yeah,
They still
Reds
do it.
country is
Yep.
much more than the Cincinnati metro area.
Yeah, they go to Athens. They go to
Definitely.
Parkersburg, West Virginia. They'll go all over those
Yep.
places. Now, listen, when I was a kid, my parents divorced. My mom lived in suburban Columbus. And back then, and we're talking about the early to mid 90s, like it wasn't near as easy on a cable system to say, well, this sports channel is for this is for that. It was like
Right.
we had one sports channel and they would decide whether they played the Reds or Indians. Like there was no second channel. Like at the time it was Time Warner that was also here in Columbus, but you like where they lived, they couldn't get anything other than this one. It was a monopoly. And so Time Warner, if people had that, they could watch either one. They had a separate channel. Indians, Reds playing at the same time, you can pick. Well, the one my mom had didn't. And
Oh.
so I spent beginning in 1994, 95 when Cleveland got good again. I spent that time that I had to spend at my mom's house unable to watch the Reds. And I developed it's not rational. I developed a disdain for Cleveland because I didn't even want to watch it. And I already didn't like the Browns. The Browns fans treated us Bengals fans really poorly around Columbus. It was bungles this and bungles that. And it's like, you're a Browns fan. Let's stop. Okay. But no, it's been happening one way or another since I'm a teenager. And here it was, the biggest game of the year. I was actually kind of lucky, Rex. My son went to his first homecoming that same night.
Oh, wow.
And so I was kind of able to divert my attention, like
Sure.
let me go pick my son up from homecoming, and I'll be out in the parking lot listening to the game, because I can't watch it anyway. So, all right, let's go on to viewer mail.
All right.
As Chad used to say, actual letters from actual viewers. I got a big stack of them this
Channeling
week.
his inner David Letterman.
That's right. That's right. How long will it be before nobody gets that even?
I don't know.
I hasten to assume that some of our favorite people in the Slack might not even really know that much about David Letterman, but
It could be.
But he was something else. Well, he still is, but he doesn't have a show anymore.
Yeah, but back then, when you come home from the Court Street bars in Athens and watch him and Paul Schaefer in the world's most dangerous band.
That's right. Was the world's most dangerous podcast.
Chad is ripping off Letterman left and right.
It's as if Chad grew up the way we did, watching Letterman at late night. All right, let's get started here. Hunter Martin says, I am pleased we made the playoffs, and our pitching staff was excellent this year. However, I'm concerned with how Tito has managed the offense. Questionable lineups, no run game, emphasis on defense to a fault, and the lack of hitting development worry me. I get that President Nick Kroll hasn't given him a ton to work with, but if Sal Stewart is riding the pine because Ke'Bryan Hayes has to play every day, then I'm going to be out on Tito pretty quick next year. All right. So I can't disagree completely, right? I mean, we're all finding things that we wish would have been done differently. But I will say this. I believe social media is the biggest reason, but I believe our nitpicking of lineups and playing time seems to have peaked, right, in these last 10 to 15 years. It's more collective, right? It used to be maybe I would shout it into the wind down in Morgan County, Ohio, and nobody would hear me because nobody cared. But now I've got a place where I can go not only share my frustration, but find out why other people are upset, right? And so I'll go back to something Chris Garber and I talked about in the spring, and the way this team was constructed. I just think Tito just leaned into that, maybe to a fault. But he leaned into the fact that he looked around and he says, we don't have any home run hitters really. And we need to be better at defense. Remember, I think it was it right before the trade deadline? Was that when you were in LA?
No, I was in LA at the end of August.
Well, there was a game not long before a day or two before the trade deadline. I was reading recently about it, and it was like I think Noelvi Marte made an error, right? That cost the Reds, and then boom, they make the trade for Marte. I just think they leaned into it so much better for worse. Now, we can certainly quibble with a lot of these things. Like, they need to try to use some of the power they do have available to them, maybe, whether that's in the form of Sal Stewart or Will Benson or whatever. But it just didn't seem like that's what Tito wanted. And Chris also pointed out, I remember at another show Chris did with me where he's like, well, hey, Tito seemed great. He seemed really thrilled when Manny Ramirez and David Ortiz were hitting home runs for him, right? So it's not as if Tito wouldn't want home run hitters. I guess, what are your thoughts overall on some of the nitpicking or the complaints that have a lot of validity, but at the same time, it is what it is, right?
Well, first of all, I don't think we would be in the playoffs if Tito was not our manager. And this was the third time in his career that he's taken a team to the playoffs in his first year as their skipper. He did it with the Red Sox and he did it with the Indians. And I think in the course of a 162 game season, you can find any number of opportunities to question a lineup decision or a pinch hitting decision or what have you. But I think he has always been someone who believes in what he calls playing clean baseball. Mm-hmm. And that dates back to when he was a member of the national championship team here in Tucson for the University of Arizona. I think he learned back then that fundamentals matter, and he leans on that. He's got that guy Mills, who's been one of his coaches since they played together at the U of A. But one thing that I'll agree with from Hunter's concerns is I didn't understand why we stopped being the running Reds. I mean, that was something we were called, I think, either last season or the season before. And to me, when you've got a team that can be a threat on the base paths, that adds a lot of dimensions to your offense. It certainly is going to help with run production. And I think when you are a base stealing team, then you're also less likely to make some of the base running mistakes that we saw from these young guys. Last thing I'll say is I remember there was an interview with Tito near the end of the season where he said that one of the things that we need to do in this offseason is get what I think he called a big bopper. So I'm sure that he's going to be in the ear of the front office, and that's something that gives me hope. With more hope with him being our manager, is I think he's going to be very persuasive with the Castellinis and Nick Kroll in a way that maybe a less experienced manager wouldn't be.
And I think even getting Ke'Bryan Hayes in the first place and the things he did, I think some of that stuff, he was leaning into a certain theory on how he was going to get the Reds where he wanted to get them. And now's the time, as we turn the page, and we'll have more on that idea of a big bopper in a minute. That's when it's like, okay, let's regroup and let's find out what we need to do. All right, let's move on. Andrew Williams, he says, thanks so much for the commitment you've put towards this channel and podcast. I'm about to break the rule, and the rule that Andrew always got into trouble with was asking more than one question.
I have broken that rule.
He said, I don't bite your heads off the way Chad did. I want that on the record.
Chad was a purist.
Yes, he was. He says, but I haven't submitted a question for a while, so here goes. Okay, number one, where does the Will Benson saga go from here? It's really disheartening to see the lack of usage and maximization of his talents. Let's answer that one first. I'm going to say it. Tito doesn't trust or think that Will Benson's an everyday guy. He never has. That's why the Reds got him in the first place. Tito was the manager in Cleveland that spring when the then Indians traded him to Cincinnati for a bag of baseballs. All right. So, I mean, I admire Will Benson's accomplishments, like the mental acuity and toughness it takes. He didn't play in a game hardly at all from like August 12th to like September, whatever. Right. I mean, he rode the pine. He had splinters up his tuchus, right? That whole time. And they said, Charlie Goldsmith, other people said, he's out there taking fly balls every day. He's in the cage every day. And I admire that so much, because had he not done that, it would have given them the excuse they needed to just DFA him and get rid of him. And they needed him because there came a time where he became a spark to them right when they started to come back. Now, all that said, it's evident to me from the Cleveland example to the way he was treated this year. I don't think I don't know how I'd say if Tito treated him unfair, but Tito had a thought of who he is and what he is, and he just didn't use him. So my guess is he's arbitration eligible for the first time this coming year. I would guess they might not tender him. They might not even, tender a contract, which means they won't go to arbitration. He'll be a free agent. That would be my guess.
Well, I would hope that Tito saw some of the heart and character that Will Benson showed during this season, and also would recognize that he's clearly a fan favorite. And the other thing that I would hope he would look at is Benson's personal story. What it took for him to get into the majors at all, given some of the struggles that he dealt with within his family. And I think personal stories like his lay the groundwork for outstanding accomplishments in almost any career that you choose. And I'm a Benson fan. I like him. I hope he's with us for a long time moving forward. And I think he's got a tremendous amount of potential that we can work on developing. There's a lot of guys on that roster who I don't think have shown their true potential yet, and we need to be patient with that.
That's fair. I guess my point would probably be, if they do keep him, that my hope for him would be, and I guess my hope for the Reds would be that he is a fourth or fifth outfielder.
Yes.
But that he's used more commensurate with, well, hey, he needs to get like one start every week, like at least once a week, and probably come off the bench, 2 to 3 other times a week. Like,
I think you could DH him
you could.
as well, given his power potential, and he's didn't he have one of our higher averages with men in scoring position?
I think he did, because he came through like in those ways.
Yeah.
But he just didn't get like, I can't tell you the number of times, even yesterday, but over the whole season, how many times did a right-handed reliever come in to face a right-handed batter? And I'm seeing on Twitter or on our Slack channel, why hasn't Benson pinch hitting?
Right.
Like, it just that's how it was. And you just wonder at some point, can they continue to operate that way, or will they change? Will they give him more of a shot? Question number 2 of Andrew Williams's post. He says, what can we expect from Ellie's development going forward, given the quad injury? It pains me to say it, but for a superstar with that level of talent, this year, and even his growth so far, has been disappointing. This is more of a backhanded compliment than anything, because I see what he could be. Now, I'm going to say, first off, this proves that our Slack discussion is more civil and more fair, even to the players themselves, than what you find out there on social media. Because here Andrew is asking a question, and he's pointing out that there's an injury. Okay? Too many people forget or ignore the fact that Ellie definitely was playing hurt. And
all year long.
They might bash him and say he's not as good or all this other stuff, but he was playing hurt. You're right. At least 2/3 of the season.
Yeah.
Before the All-Star break, probably back in May or June, he hurt that quad. All right. So I will die on that hill that says Ellie was playing through pain and simply could not recapture. Like, if we saw him running better, maybe late August, early September going forward, right? A little bit better. So I just don't think he could completely recapture everything after all that he had been through, and maybe even some of the mechanical issues or whatever with the swing. But look, his strikeout percentage still this year, even though he struggled with that injury, was 25.9%. He was 33.7 and 31.3 his first 2 years. That tells me that he's a more mature hitter. All right. So we just need to see the power maybe increase. Obviously, you can't go 6-8 weeks with only 1 home run.
No.
And then he had 37 stolen bases, but it didn't feel like enough. And he also wasn't taking third base as often. And he would have beaten out probably 4 or 5 ground balls this year. Like the last 2 years, he would have beaten these grounders out that he couldn't beat out this year because he just wasn't running as well. Come back healthier and ready to produce more next year. I'm all on board. I think he's going to be just fine and more than fine. I think it's going to be another building block toward him being a superstar.
I think he is much more disciplined, much less impulsive. And I'm also, again, personal stories, I think, say a lot. And look how quickly he learned English.
Yeah.
I mean, when he was first up with us, they needed an interpreter when he was interviewed as the star of the game. And look how quickly he learned English and how well he speaks it. And conversational English is not that easy to learn. But what we were used to seeing when he first broke into the scene was tape measure home runs and him stealing multiple bases. And we didn't see that this year. And I think a lot of that was the injury. But I also think he was really not – he wasn't himself because of the injury, but I don't know that he was always allowed to be himself the way he was being managed. And I'm not sure where to trace that. I know there's been a lot of criticism on our Slack channel of our hitting instructor, and the most valid criticism I've seen, and I think it was Andrew who said it. And Andrew's got a background where I think he's a credible person in that field. Is that the best thing a hitting instructor can do is help you to build on your own strengths and what you bring to the table, and not try to pigeonhole you too much.
Yeah, and I guess we'll just have to see, though. I mean, certainly hitting line drives, that never goes out of style. So,
No.
so hopefully it'll be fine. And I do believe, I mean, he was held back by injury 2/3 of the year. Let's just say that, right? But he wasn't running as often even earlier, like back in April, and we were kind of
Yes.
wondering why. All that, and he still stole 37 bases. So what can he be? Because he's getting on more times, right? More often, maybe, than as he gets older, he will be. So hopefully it all evens out to he's going to be a 50 stolen base guy, hopefully a 30 home run guy, and then who knows what else. Because I would maintain that even though the guy he was in 2024 was the guy who's going to do something almost every day, one thing every game to get you out of your seat, right? And that didn't always mean they won games because he can't do it by himself. But I would maintain that if he could get back to that, plus be more mature and all those other things, I mean, that's where the improvement comes. So hopefully that happens.
Well, and
All right.
hopefully we sign him too. I know that everyone's saying his price tag is going to be higher than what the Reds usually pay, but given that we brought him up through our farm system, and we did that because we saw him as a major investment, I think not paying whatever it takes to keep him in a Reds uniform would just be a crime. If I have to see him in Dodger blue or Yankee pinstripes, Seth, I don't know. I don't know that I can handle that.
Yeah, the never surrender Rex might might be looking at things differently at that point. All right, Kyle Kapler says, and he's referring to the game, hopefully not the beginning of the show because he hasn't seen it yet. He says, "Well, that was lame." Just kidding. At least a very flawed team gave us that, meaning a trip to the playoffs. Better than nothing. I know we'll have plenty time to discuss, but in my opinion, these are the biggest needs this offseason. All right, he's got 3 of them. All right, let's look at them. Legit middle of the order hitter to bat behind Ellie every day. And he says, I don't care about the position. Well, you mentioned that. Tito would love to have a bopper, right? I'd love to see it. I don't know that they'll spend the money on the word. The word was legit, right? I mean, Austin Hayes is a fine player when he's healthy, but that's not legit middle of the order. All right.
No.
So I guess the question would be the one that came up in the chat on Late Night Reds on Sunday. Which would you rather have if the Reds were willing to put up the money? Pete Alonso or Kyle Schwarber?
I think I would rather have Alonso. I think he's a more complete player. I think there's a lot of affection for Schwarber because he's from Middletown, Ohio, and
I never heard that before, Rex.
Yeah,
he's from Middletown.
That's what I have read. Yeah, and it would be a big thing to have him come back to his home state. He probably grew up as a Reds fan.
Oh, he did.
Being from that area. But I just think Alonso is a more complete player. And I also think by that, I mean, I think he brings you some things in the field. I think he's an outstanding first baseman. And I also think that he's dealt with more adversity in his career. That he had plenty of adversity in this season.
Well, and then he opted out right away, though.
Yeah,
so yeah. All right, I'm going to come at you a little different because I followed the Cubs run back in 2016, and he came back from injury and was just amazing that playoffs run they had. I'm a Tony Kornheiser fan, and he talks about the Nationals a lot on his podcast. and Schwarber played for them for part of a season before.
Right,
I
right.
think that was when they traded him to the Yankees. But even as a Philly, the Phillies have a lot of legit players. Bryce Harper, Trey Turner. These guys have, well, speaking of the Nationals, these guys have been good elsewhere. They're good there, right? But guys like Buster Olney and Tim Kirchhoff, when they come on with Kornheiser, and Kornheiser always asks about Schwarber and these other guys, I think it was Buster Olney that said Schwarber is the alpha on that Phillies team. And he said that he is, even though, Harper's won MVPs and, all this other stuff, Schwarber's the guy. And they turn to him and they look toward him and he hits these home runs. I mean, what he hit 50, was it 57 this year? I mean, he hits a lot of home runs. um, so, but the other thing he said is this, and this came out of nowhere because this is Kornheiser, doesn't care about Cincinnati. They were not even talking about the Reds at all. But he asked him some question. He went down this road, and then all of a sudden he goes, "But you know what? He's also the type of guy that just would do something just because that's what he wants to do." And this is back in like June or July. He said this,
Right.
and he said he's from the Cincinnati area. He's like, I wouldn't be shocked at all if he went back to Cincinnati and tried to take them to the promised land. What? Because I mean, that's where I would say it would be cool. Because if Alonso comes, it's because they offered him X amount of dollars, or he wanted to get a pillow contract and hit balls into the river for a whole year, and then he can go get his next contract. But if Schwarber is that type of guy in reality that Buster Olney says he is, I mean, bring him. I would be all in on him coming to Cincinnati if he's that, because they don't have that leader. I can't speak to Alonso as a leader. I don't know. But from hearing that about Schwarber in a clubhouse full of guys, like real guys, I guess I would go that way.
That's a very persuasive anecdote. I appreciate you sharing that.
Well, and again, I heard it somewhere else, but it moved me enough because I was always the guy. Oh, he's from Middletown, right? We get it, right? I was that guy. But hearing that story made me want to just drive to Philadelphia and bring him back. So. All right, he said they won't do this, but he think this is Kyle Kapler's second of 3 points. He thinks they should get a real second baseman. Maybe, he says, I'm not sure about McLean. Maybe he was still rusty from that injury, but who knows? And he thinks McLean would be better more in an Espinal role, which would be the utility. I mean, I'm the McLean guy. Like, I literally, the day of the first playoff game, I bought this autographed McLean card at the card shop. And I told the guy who's a Reds fan, I said, I'm getting him some good juju. He's going to get a hit tonight. And he did.
Got two, I think.
Yeah, he got two. So yeah. Chris Garber, Chris Garber is the first one to kind of raise an eyebrow about Spencer Steer. Not really for sure if he's a guy. Like, he's a good player, but is he a guy we can count on? Chris is also at that point, I think, with McLean now, and I think we all kind of have to be, right? I mean, he missed an entire season with an injury, and then he followed that up with a really rough season this year. So I'm just hopeful. He has a lot of holes in his swing right now, Rex. Your thoughts on McLean? Because I'm kind of a McLean stan, and even though I'm jury out right now type, I think I would still probably, if I got in a conversation, still defend him. So what do you think about McLean?
I am leaning more towards your position, Seth, and not only because I think we all saw from the moment he came into the organization all of the skills that Matt McLean has to be an all-around ball player. I think he's already demonstrated what an excellent defender he is. And I think we also have this tendency in a lot of areas of life, certainly when it comes to our sports teams, to wanting a quick fix. Mm-hmm. And this is somebody who, just like Ellie, we were developing within the organization. And he had an awful injury and struggled coming back from it this year, but he's still so young and he's got such outstanding potential. And I think he could really be a mainstay for the team if we're patient and work to help him to develop that impressive skill set that he has.
Yeah, this was his age 25 season. He did have the entire season lost. So, in experience, I might say it's his age 24 season because he didn't play at age 24. Um, and he was a college guy, right? He went to UCLA.
Right.
So, he's a little bit further along in his age and he's 2 full years older than Nelly, I guess, is where we are. So, with Ellie, it's still like, hey, he's still 23. Hey, Barry Larkin had more errors when he was 24 than Ellie did when he's 23. Let's explain that again. With Matt, it's probably next year needs to be a good year. You know
Well,
what I mean?
yeah.
So, I mean, but I'm not ready to say, hey, he doesn't deserve to be the second baseman anymore.
I'm not ready to say that he's a bench player either.
No. So that's where we'll disagree. The last one I think we can all wrap our arms around and never have an argument for, even the most ardent Graham Ashcraft fans in the world, Nate Dotson, I'm talking about you. He says he wants a shutdown lefty, something that Rogers was supposed to be. All right. Now, a shutdown lefty in the pen, actually, of the three he mentioned, a real legit power hitter that's going to cost a lot of money, a replacement for Matt McLean, which I don't think the organization is want to do, or a shutdown lefty. I think that's the most realistic of his three, right? And it's probably the easiest to procure in one way or another, either be by trade. Like this organization's done a good job with some of these trades. So for relievers, obviously the Rogers deal blew up in their face quite a bit, and actually he's still pitching for the Cubs. So that's kind of weird because the Reds
Yeah.
traded the Pirates who flipped them to the Cubs. But your thoughts? I mean, obviously, I think bullpen pieces in the offseason are usually the easiest to come by.
Well, they always say that good pitching beats good hitting. And we have an impressive pitching staff, but that is the one hole. That is the one hole that needs to be filled. So I don't disagree that needs to be a high priority. However, I don't think that you can pick number one or number three from Kyle's list and say that's got to be the priority. I think they both have to be.
Mm-hmm.
I think they both have to be because I think we made it into the playoffs because of our pitching, but I think we would have made it further if we had a more explosive offense and an offense that could come at you from a number of different facets, which is why I wish we would get back into base running as well.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. All right. Jace Linford says, hey, Seth, first of all, I want to say thanks for doing all this through the season to help with the ups and downs and to give us a sounding board for the season. Really appreciate you. And he says, sorry, incoming thoughts will be long. So, I've always tried. We read all the viewer mail, so we're going. We're plunging through. I guess I would think that's Jace isn't the first to say thank you to me. The community is already there, like even before I arrived into the community. So I'm just happy that we're still doing it, right? Like the podcasts and then the Slack channel and all that. Like that's the kind of stuff that when the situation came up with Chad not being able to run it anymore, and it's either do it or it's gone. I'm glad we're doing it, Rex.
Very grateful to you and Skylar and Ben and some of your regular guest hosts like Chris. You guys really stepped up.
Well, no, it's been very rewarding, and I couldn't imagine not having not even just me doing it. I can't imagine not having the available platform that we have. And by the way, I never brought this up last week. I meant to. We are the 91st ranked podcast about baseball on Apple Podcasts.
Wow, that's impressive.
That's an 85 position jump from whenever the last time this analytics team went through this. And we are ahead of some decent shows, including the Jim Day podcast, which I know he only comes out once a week, if that, during the season. But the fact that we were able to make that jump, it was actually the second or third biggest jump of any podcast in the medium to go up 85 spots. That was pretty cool. And so, yeah, our good friend Tim Daniel at Locked On, they were pretty high up. Of course, they go every day, so it has to do with number of downloads and things like that. But he was happy that they beat out a certain other Reds podcast platform. So happy for the Locked On guys, but really excited and thankful to all of you for continuing to make this what it is. Because, I mean, to jump up 85 spots on we're talking about every team in baseball has podcasts now, right? So, multiple. So that was pretty cool. But anyway, all right. Jace says, as for the season, it was fun to see them in the playoffs. It may be weird, but literally just seemed brighter and more real than all those regular season games. The games had a real weight to them, and that was fun. I think the best way to sum everything up is what Mookie Betts said after the game. He said it was neat to see them come back a little and to even make the playoffs in the first place. It shows you how the rest of the league doesn't take this Reds team seriously. He says, also watching both games, the Dodgers' confidence and body language spoiled the script already. They never once looked like they felt like they could lose. Supreme confidence because they knew we were nowhere close to their level. Man, this is negative, Chase. It was like a high school team playing against an MLB team, and that's what it felt like. Even when they won, they reacted almost the same way they would to a regular season win. Well, that's the whole thing about making it 12 out of 13 years or whatever. These guys, the Dodgers expect – I'm surprised they even took the picture in the outfield. Like, if I'm the Dodgers at this point, are you even celebrating anything other than a league championship? I mean, that's where I'd be. He says the Reds need a complete overhaul. Scouting, game prep, hitting coach, development minus DJ, front office, and I'd even say manager, but boy, Chase is out. He said, but that's not a good option. There's not a good option other than Tito, but they need to build the roster for Tito and how he manages. Maybe this year was, let's see what we've got this year. We did discuss that a little bit. I think there's something to that. And we'll see more cohesively built team next year, but I don't know. I mean, you can't argue with the idea because the Dodgers are just the standard, right? I mean, that's where we are right now. Whether it's fair that they can spend $400 million in dead money or that they can prorate a $700 million contract, they're not breaking any rules that I know of, right? So if the Castellinis wanted to pony up and start spending more money, they probably could. Now, I want you to talk about this too, but tweaking within the organization, I think, will happen. We know Tito's going to be back. Unless he decides he needs to retire again for health reasons, Tito's back. So hopefully they build upon the positives of this year, right? And then they continue to piece it together because this was not a one-year deal, and yet they rose the level a little bit this year, and hopefully they keep going.
So I submitted a viewer mail question, and I did it before you asked me to be on the show, but I'm going to steal a little bit from it. I think one of the most important things that we can do, and this is not an original thought, Skylar Webker talked about it on our Slack channel a couple of months ago, is we need to, with these players who we have under team control for the next 2 or 3 seasons, these young guys, we need to offer them long-term deals, which is a good thing for them given, hey, you're a professional athlete and your career could be over tomorrow with a devastating injury. A long-term deal is good for a young player, and it's also good for the club. I think we need to do that with as many of these guys who we consider part of our core as possible. I do think that we need to find both a power hitter, and I think it needs to be an outfielder, and somebody to be that lefty in the bullpen, power reliever in the bullpen. Do think we need to get back to base running. And I also think that with 3 specific guys, we need to be working on developing their potential, because I think each one of them has the opportunity to be an all-star. One of them already has been, and that's Ellie. But the other two are Matt McLean, who we already talked about, and Noelvi Marte. I think that trio right there could be they could be the foundation for a contending Reds team if we work on developing their full potential.
Well, listen, too, though, I was just talking a little bit about the 2016 Cubs. Um, they had Rizzo, they had Bryant, and they had, I always blank on the shortstop, Baez. They had those guys, right? They were young, and they went from 2015, they just missed the playoffs, and that's before they expanded the playoffs like they have now. And what they go into the next year and they add John Lester, I believe, at that time, right? And they added guys like Dexter Fowler and Jason Hayward, who were veterans. That's that's where we are. You're exactly right. If you could lock up some of these guys, let's do it. But then you've got to go secure some of these other pieces that aren't just, well, we waited till January or early February and you didn't sign yet, so take our $5 million. And I don't dislike Austin Hayes. That's not the point. But the point is, it needs to be beyond Austin Hayes, right? It needs to be actual guys. And I don't know that it needs to be a starting pitcher. I use John Lester because that's what the Cubs needed. But they need actual guys who have either been there before or show the potential to help be leaders, that kind of thing. And I think that's where they need to go. So
to your shirt tonight, we missed a big opportunity not making Joey Votto a player coach or a hitting instructor, giving him some kind of leadership role that he would have been all over. That guy is a natural leader, and the fact that we didn't find a way to keep him in the organization it's a disgrace and a missed opportunity.
yeah, I guess my only point with him would be he made all the money. He made a lot of money. Like those kind of guys don't need it, right? So
No.
my hope still with Joey is that like he's traveled, he's been doing, living the life of someone who wasn't able to live this life the last X amount of years because he was always playing baseball or getting ready to play baseball. And now maybe this offseason, maybe he works his way back somehow into some form of a role. And even if that's just to come, do a bobblehead night or something like that and be recognized. They did not recognize him at
I
all.
know, just awful.
The past few years. So, yeah, that's where I am with it. We're going to skip your question because you already kind of talked about
Fair
it.
enough.
I put down here, it was awkward that we're going to read a question that you wrote when you're sitting right there beside me on the screen. Brian Bowdy says, how do you think the Castellinis see this season? That's a good question. I'm afraid they see it as a smashing success. Winning record, made it to the playoffs, highest attendance in a decade. That's the big one. No big payroll commitments for next year, and surely they turned an operating profit again, which I think they did almost every year anyway. Maybe not, obviously 2020, certainly. They're ready to pat Nick and Brad on the head, keep their payroll budget basically the same, and hope for the same lack of peaks and valleys next year. That was funny because did you see Doug Glanville, who he's a former player? He called the game as an analyst there for ESPN, the two games in LA. He put out a tweet like he said, "This is a strange team. Like 5-game winning streak was their biggest. 5-game losing streak was the biggest, right? And the number of things he had, like it was even Steven, and we called it the roller coaster for a reason. It's just that's what they got. They paid for a 500-ish team, right? It could have been 77 or 78. It ended up being 83 wins. Okay, so those payroll commitments, though, I was worried that they owed Jamer Candelario the full $15 million. Next year is an option year, so I think they only owe him 3. Okay, so they paid him a bunch of money this year to go away, and then next year they're only going to pay him 3. I think. My assumption is they won't pick up the mutual option on Hayes because it's $12 million, right? So they'll pay him $1 million to go away or restructure, right? And that leaves them only not counting Ellie and the other guys that aren't arbitration eligible yet, that leaves $33 to $35 million of commitments. And that's your Hunter Green contract, your Trevino contract. Scott Barlow somehow is owed like $6.5, $7 million next year. So unless they do what you suggest and pay some of these guys long term, they're working from. I mean, it's not much there at all. So do with that what you will, Rex. I mean, I would argue that would give them the ability to go sign some people, but I don't know that they will.
Well, you'd have to hope that if someone's got the kind of money that Bob Castellini has, that he's got a lot of ways to spend that money to make more money other than owning a sports team. You have to hope that he's owning a sports team because he wants that team to eventually be a winner. And I don't know why anybody would, with the capacity to buy a sports team, would buy one if they didn't want it to be a winner, given that there's lots of other ways they could invest money just to make more money. So, he's kind of you never hear from him. I mean, I think you hear from his son, obviously, but we never hear from him. So it's hard to know what his motivations were for buying the team in the first place, or what his goals are. I mean, other owners are a lot more voluble about what they want from the team and what their expectations are. You don't hear that from him.
I think health is the issue for there. He was in the team picture, which they always take at the end of the season. He actually came and was in that picture, but I don't think he hasn't been healthy for multiple years. I was field level for the Big Red Machine celebration one of the nights they did the 50-year anniversary, and Phil was front and center. I took a picture of him and in his loafers, and but Bob was nowhere to be seen. I just don't think I think it's a health situation. So I think it's twofold or threefold. It's they bought the team. We've got a few friends on here who have been reminding the Reds about the promise that was written about in the letter that talked about winning baseball, being back in Cincinnati. But I think 2020 broke them. I think they got scared of losing money and decided not to do that sort of thing again, where going into 2020, they kind of went all in as far as they could go all in, that is. And it just, some of it backfired. Moustakas and Shogo were not good, but some of the other things that they did, they just won't be doing that anymore. Is the mentality. So I don't know. I think now though it's a preservation thing. So a guy like Phil, this is all he has, right? And it's not Phil's not the reason that they had the money to be able to do it in the first place. But Phil thinks, I'm assuming, that he is entitled or something to have all this. And so what are they going to do with it, right? Like, are you going to go out and try to win, or are you going to just try to preserve what you have because you like having it?
It just again, I can't imagine why anybody would want to own a sports team if they didn't want it to be a winner. And this fan base has been waiting for a long, long time for a winner. And a lot of the folks who grew up in the 70s and 80s, like I did, remember that time. But there's most of the guys on our Slack channel they have no memory of the Reds being a winning team, and that's gradually what the fan base is becoming. Right. And people vote with their feet, and eventually they're going to stop coming to the ball club. They're going to stop buying the gear. They're going to stop watching the games if it looks like the team is not making sincere efforts to be a contender.
Yeah. All right, we got a few more. James Irvin says, great to see the Reds back in the postseason, even if they limped in and didn't do anything. Got to take the wins when you can get them with this franchise. No question for me, just grateful for the community you guys make watching Reds baseball more fun. Thanks so much, James. I appreciate that. He says, cheers, gang, and great job this year on the pod. Kevin Lynch said, "Who's one guy on the current roster you'd like to see have a bigger role next year?" He says Sal is the obvious one, but his heart says Will Benson. We talked a little bit about that earlier. Um, the guy on this roster already that I think I guess Sal's got to be it, right? I mean, for me, like I do like Will Benson. It's not that I don't like him. I just don't. I think he's been given opportunities, and I think he's shown not to be an everyday guy, and that's my opinion. And obviously, he hasn't shown that he can be yet, but maybe he can. Do you have another person other than Sal?
Well, I think Sal is the obvious choice because of his potential. But the person who I'm most excited about is Chase Burns.
Okay.
I think he is. I said on our Slack channel last night when he came in for relief during essentially mop up time in that game that he's eventually going to be the person we consider the ace of the staff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's because of the stuff that he has. But I also think, Hunter can be a little self-absorbed. I didn't care for an interview that he did after one of his starts near the end of the season where he seemed to be putting a lot of blame on his teammates. You just don't do that. So I'd say Chase Burns, but another one is TJ Friedel. Okay. I think he is already one of the better leadoff hitters in the league. But I think he has more capacity to be a leader. I think Tito saw that in him when he took over the team, and I'd like to see his leadership skills manifest themselves more than I saw this season. And I think he could be one of those guys, along with, of course, Ellie and McLean. That could help us be the running Reds again. You get on base, and if people are automatically thinking, Friedel's on base, he might be ready to swipe one. So those would be my thoughts, those two guys.
Don't forget Rhett Lauder is going to be
chosen. Oh, yeah.
And
Can't forget that.
That's for a different reason, that he might have a bigger role because he didn't get a chance to have any role this year. So
absolutely,
I'm looking forward to what Burns and Lauder can do together, in combination with the guys they already have. All right, Joey Gaditza, and then we have two more. So Joey's it, and then one more after that. Joey says, after making the playoffs, surely they'll spend some money to build on the current roster, right? I like the guys we have too, but that can't be the narrative going into the offseason. Can it? It always is like that. It's time to change that culture. What, to my point earlier, you can like the guys you have, and in fact, I think you've got quite a core with the pitching they have, plus the three guys specifically, plus Sal Stewart that you mentioned, Ellie, Marte, McLean, and Sal Stewart.
Yes.
You start with that, and you've got a core on offense. You start with Hunter and Abbott and Burns and Lodolo. If you don't trade one of those guys for a bat, that could be happen too. I'm sure we'll have plenty of chances to talk about these scenarios, but you've got the core. Now you've got to go develop like the building of it. I always return to 1999, but Greg Vaughn coming to town, that made a big deal. That made a huge difference. And I guess I'm going to lean in on the idea of Schwarber, but it's very unrealistic with this Reds team that they will commit to that. All right, let's go. We're almost an hour 10, so this last question is going to really fit well because Brandon Kamek came in and he says, I have a lot of thoughts, but in the interest of shortening a 4-hour pod, all right, you're not far off, Brandon. He says, sell the team, Bob, and go Reds.
Well, I responded to Brandon's post on the viewer mail channel by saying something that has been said in other contexts in a much less favorable way. Let's go, Brandon.
Well, Sell the Team, Bob was certainly a landmark event for this community. It just doesn't seem like it's going to happen, right?
No.
And I don't think Chad thought it was going to happen when he put a billboard up either. But there, there's something to the idea that I do believe Reds fans deserve more. The point you made about what surely is multiple lost generations now of Reds fans. The fact that we have diehards in our Patreon group that are that much younger that didn't get to even see the '99 team or remember them, like
Yeah.
their commitment to the Reds is really, in my mind, respectful. I'm so respectful of them and the fact that you could be a huge Reds fan without experiencing all that much success. I have 1990. I'll cling to that forever until they win again, right? Um, it's so hard for me to believe that I was 11 years old when they won in 1990, and my oldest son's turning 15 here in a few weeks, and
Wow. That's wonderful.
he doesn't remember though. Like he was 2 in 2012, so he doesn't remember that great season. He remembers 2020 and the two games in Atlanta, and he remembers these two games in LA. And so I desperately want for him and others his age and even older, like even in their 20s and early 30s, like I want people to experience what you and I got to see.
I remember I was 27 in 1990, and I loved that we beat the A's for two reasons.
Mhm.
First of all, they had Canseco and McGuire, and everybody thought that they were going to pound the Reds. Just those two guys single-handedly.
Exactly.
And then we swept them. But the other reason I loved that we beat the A's was that I was 9 years old in 1972 when we lost the World Series to them, and in 7 games.
Yep.
And I remember listening to a pod that I think Chad did with Bill Lack. And Bill is, as we know, the pod father and the senior member of our channel. And he went like inning by inning of that 72 series. So, for those of us who were much younger then, to have them beat the A's in 90 was just great on both levels.
It was very good. It was great on my level because one of my best friends, for some reason, his dad was an Indians fan, his mom was a Reds fan, and he liked Mark McGuire. So he liked Mark McGuire so much that when the Reds make the World Series to play the A's, he cheered for the A's.
Oh man!
And this is down in Southeast Ohio, and so I was going crazy. I was so happy when they beat them. So I am hopeful that we can return to those days. I'm hopeful that this was one step, year one under Terry Francona, one step toward that. I'm going to remain hopeful and not get too down on the fact that things ended in a way I didn't like. I'm certainly sad that's over, but
yeah.
Rex, I look forward to next year. I look forward to this off season with all of the folks in our group here at the Riverfront that we can enjoy getting ready for 2026. And Rex, I want to thank you again for taking all this time. I don't think you thought it was going to be this long, but then also the steadfast commitment to not surrendering down the stretch. So thanks so much. You deserve to be applauded, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, buddy. I really appreciate the opportunity after listening to your podcast and the one Late Night Reds to be a guest on the podcast is really a tremendous honor, and I appreciate the opportunity.
You join a distinguished list of guest hosts, so we appreciate you for
right.
diving in here. And everybody, continue to tune in. If you're new here, you've got an off season ahead of getting ready for 2026. Join the Patreon group, join our Slack channel. We'll be happy to add new members and get some new people in the conversation. And I guess, again, we're going so long right now, we're just going to cut it right there. Rex, have a great weekend.
You
and
too,
everybody,
buddy.
Be safe out there and go Reds. We'll get ready for next year and come back better than ever.